Good word.
That's great.
Use that.
Oh,
Laura, can you grab a pen off that shelf?
What is it?
Anything that works.
Was it made to 10?
What is it?
Yeah, this one doesn't work.
Okay.
I assume that's
Thanks.
So we are holding on Daf Hey.
I see it.
Coming up. So we said, base the house, the ani, saying eating his dinner, and someone standing on his shoulders saying Kriya Shema. Daf Gimel is 3 camels and a Hurva, the first carrying the line of Dav, the second one carrying Eliyahu Navi, the third carrying David Melech, and Dav Dalet is a door spanning from Geula, the neighborhood, to the Kotel with David Melech on top of it in his chassid getup. And now we're in Daf Hey. We're in the middle. So we had said before that 2 days ago we started talking about the Inyan, the mitzvah as the Gemara calls it, of Kriya Shema Lamita, and we said that it's Chiyav Adin, and it has certain shmira, protective qualities to it. On the bottom of the Ahava base, we talked about the protection from Chet, which is alluded to again on the top of the Ahmed, and we said second of all, it protects one from Mazikin, and that's really where we picked up yesterday, that when it says Kriya Shema Lamita, it's like he has a double-edged sword, a Chayav Shel Kios, double-edged sword in his hand, and one's like others, if not like Rashi, that means double-edged to protect both from his chait as well as his mazikin. And someone said on the art scroll that Yishalom Gam Chadashim had said that it protects your body from the mazikin and your soul from the chait. Fine. The Gemara went on to say that when it says Kriya Shema, the mazikin are badil and manu, and then it said, that they separate from him. And then it said, learning Torah makes the proof text is that Torah causes mazikin to separate from him, chase them away. That was Rabbi Shimon Lakish's contention, and Rabbi Yochanan had said, yeah, it's true that learning Torah does keep mazikin away. Keep Yisurim. Sorry, we transitioned to Yisurim. I apologize. Skip something. We said that one who learns Torah not only does the mazikin go away from, but the Yisurim goes away. So then Rish Lakish had said, well, learning Torah keeps Yisurim away, and Rabbi Yochanan said, not only does it, that's true that learning Torah does keep mazikin away and keep Yisurim away, but staving off Yisurim is not the relationship between suffering and learning Torah isn't just sort of, I'll call it extrinsic, if you will, that, if a good trick to keep the suffering away is to learn Torah. It's much more intimate than that, says Rabbi Yochanan, because the Pasuk already said explicitly, when he learns Torah, Hashem will not visit him with the afflictions of Mitzrayim. But then, Rabbi Yochanan said it's much more intimately connected. That when one could learn Torah but does learn Torah, so then Yisurim suffering comes to him. And he brought a Pasuk to prove that. And Pasuk employs the word Tov, and then Tuv, really. Tov and goodness, and then he brought another pasuk to show that Tov is a reference to Torah. That's what we're up to. It's on line 25, let's call it. So 25, or maybe I'll start one line up. Line 24 at the Ella. Ella says, Rabbi Yochanan, Kol she'efshel la'asok b'Torah, anyone who could learn Torah, ve'eno osek, but doesn't, HaKadosh Baruch Hu maybe love Yisurim, not just any of Yisurim actually, but Yisurim suffering of mucha'arin, of an ugly nature, va'ochen also, and that ugly Yisurim causes him to be ugly. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Ne'elamti dumya, something like I stopped moving around, came still, something like that. Elam is a lame, not able to walk. Dumya is stillness, silence. That's not relevant. Really, what's relevant here is Shisi mituv, I became silent from your tov, I should say, from your tov, mitov, and the tov is of course the Torah, as we'll prove in a moment. So David Melech says, I became silent from speaking your words of Torah, and then it continues, uche'evei ne'akar, my pain, I had ugly pains, something like that. So ugly pains is the Yisurim that are Mucharim, that are ugly. So, who says that Hechashisi mitov, being silent of the good, is a reference to Torah? So that's Rabbi Yochanan says, Ein tov ela Torah. Tov in that pasuk refers to the Torah. Shnei Amar, as the pasuk says, you see a proof that tov could mean Torah. Ki lekach tov nasasi lechem, because a good portion I've given to you. Torasi al tazovu, do not forsake my Torah. End of quote. That's from Mishlei, and that's our proof text that tov references Torah. Period. We took questions and a discussion. Now today the Gemara picks up. We're not done with Yisurim. We've transitioned from Kriyash Malamita to Yisurim. That's what we're talking now. Suffering. But before we deal with suffering directly, since we brought that pasuk up of Ki lekach tov nasas lechem torasi al tazovu, so we have a side point on that pasuk. So we are on now line 26 at the period. Amr B'Zera. Rabbi Zera said, V'itema Rabbi Chanina Bar Papa, who said it, Bo re'eh, come see, Shalom kamidas HaKadosh Baruch Hu kamidas basar v'dam. That this structure comes up often in the Shas. It literally means someone like, come see how Hashem's ways, like midot. Hashem's midot, Hashem's ways, I'll call them, are not like basar v'dam, meaning human beings midot. Which usually means that, as I understand it, the psychology that governs human beings is not really analogous to how Hashem operates, which is not surprising because Hashem can be with human foibles and human psychology, but it's just emphasizing that the way Hashem's midos are not like how regular people's midos are, and I presume that this is instructional as much as there's a mitzvah, one of the target mitzvahs to be the damas b'drachav, to emulate his ways, and that's understood to mean whatever Hashem's midos are, you should do them too. So I presume that a person who's really aspiring for that would be Hashem-like in this way also. In any case, the Gemara is saying a little more prosaically, not discussing the mitzvah of Lidos B'Drachav, but just simply saying that look, Hashem is not like people. Why not? Midas Basar V'Dam. When it comes to regular people, Adam Mocher Chayfetz L'Chavero. If a person has something of great value to him or sentimental value to him, and he's forced to sell it. So that's how Rashi is putting the words there. So then, Mocher Atzev, the seller is sad. Like he's sad to see his thing go. You don't sell real estate or your house or your paintings off your wall unless you need the money. So if you need the money, of course you're sad to be in a situation where you've lost that painting or that house or whatever it was that you had to sell. And the Lokeach, on the other hand, Sameach, he's happy because he got a deal, right? He went to the garage sale and picked up a great painting at half price or whatever, got a deal. So he's happy. Aval HaKadosh Baruch Hu Einokim. Hashem is not like people who are I'm putting a new level just to make it more intuitively true. People are resentful or sad and they give something a valuable away because they're sad to see it go and they're sort of almost resentful or hopeful they'll get it back, where the story is that someone else has what he really wanted. But Hashem's not like that at all. Hashem's Einokim. Rather, Nasan Lahem Torah Yisrael. Hashem gave his very valuable thing away to the Jewish people, his Torah. You can maybe make a deal with the word Natan, means to give. As
Didn't sell it, he gave.
It was even more, like he gave it away, got nothing in return, and yet he's not depressed or resentful or something like that. But Sameach, Hashem is very happy, he gave it to the Jews. How do you know he's happy? Shneimar, because he's always saying, I wish you'd invest in this Torah, I want you to have it. As the Pasuk says, I've given you something great when I gave you my Torah. Don't abandon my Torah. So you see Hashem is really encouraging us to make the most of this gift he gave us. So he's not resentful or sad that he's lost it. Period. Obvious question is what does this actually mean? How did Hashem give, lose? What do we have? Is now lost? Exactly square away exactly. So I think the shot is straightforward. Well, it's abstract, but straightforward and instructive, which is, we understand that when Hashem gave the Torah, so it was lo b'shamayim, it stopped being Hashem's Torah, whatever. I can't say what Hashem needs a Torah for, I can't say. But the point is, once He gave it, like per se. But when Hashem gave the Torah to us, so He sort of handed it over to us and left it in our hands. Like that's this midrashim, famous midrashim, that the malachim, like, what are you doing that for? They're gonna, but more importantly, like you see, there's a famous Gemara in the Metzia, which I'm sure many of you know, where there's a fight over a certain psak in a kind of oven. It doesn't matter the details, but in the end, when the dust settled, someone saw Eliyahu Hanavi and said, "What was Hashem doing at this minute?" When essentially a minority who were right in Hashem's. The story is that Rabbi Eliezer has said that this certain oven is tamei, and that they voted and said no, it's tahor. Sorry, other way around. He said Eliezer said it was tahor. They voted and said it was tamei, and then ultimately there's a big, strange series of events which ended with like a boss call coming from heaven that said Rabbi Eliezer is right, and he's always right. Like, why are you fighting with him? And they said, Lo b'shamayim. It's very nice that heaven's speaking on your behalf, but we're not interested in what heaven has to say. The Torah's been given to us. And now the Torah says it's our responsibility and our right to use our brains and make a decision on how the Torah should be implemented. And you may be right, so to, whatever that means, and you may be smarter than us, Rabbi Eliezer and your gang, but you know what? We don't see it your way, and that's just how it is. We're voting, and Acharav Lahatos, the majority says you're wrong. So, Lo b'shamayim, the Torah's not in heaven anymore. We're going to overrule what you say and do what we say. And so the Gemara continues and says, a certain person, Nasser maybe, he bumped into Eliyahu Hanavi, and he said, "What was Hashem doing in this minute when poor Rabbi Eliezer was overruled despite the Baskel?" In fact, actually, they excommunicated him in the end. They kicked him out for good. He never really came back. Rabbi Eliezer is Shamuti. He spent the rest of his life in excommunication. Heavy story. In any case,
always bothering me.
Yeah, it's a heavy story. I can discuss it, but maybe not this minute. It's way off topic. But the Lo b'shamayim is our topic. So then whoever it was asked Eliyahu Hanavi, so what was Hashem doing at this heavy moment when the people down on earth were sort of overruling heaven, right? Because heaven's saying he's right, and they're saying we don't care what heaven says. So he says, the Eliyahu Hanavi said that Hashem was saying, "B'tzchunei banai," which means my children have defeated me. Which is like funny, right? That the people, the rabbis, overruled Hashem, so to speak. It's a heavy duty, remarkable, amazing Gemara, which needs thought. It's a lot of implications. But without getting into all that topic, the point of the Gemara and the point of bringing it here is that Hashem is sanctioning some sort of system of checks and balances where people can overrule Hashem, so to speak, which is wild. Because Lo b'shamayim, the Torah is no longer in heaven, now it's with us. So that's, I think, the Pasha understanding of what it means that Hashem gave the Torah to the Jewish people, like by Hashem giving it, it's sort of them to do what they see fit within parameters, but it's no longer Hashem's. Like the Tzchunei Banai, now we can overrule Hashem, so to speak. So that's the gift, and nevertheless Hashem is happy about it. And encouraging God. That's the Gemara there. Good, okay, so that was like a side point, because we mentioned the Pasuk of Gilek Tov. But back to our original topic here of Yisurim and the relationship of Talmud Torah and Yisurim, learning and suffering. So the Gemara continues on now. Yeah, the Gemara continues on now, and it says Amr B'Zera. We're on line 20. I'm sorry, Amarava, thank you. We're on line, it's called 29 from the beginning. Amarava, line 29. B'Tamer of Chista, Imroa Adam Shiyisurim Ba'alav. If a person sees that suffering is coming to him, and some make an interesting diak that why is it he sees suffering coming to him? Some say it means even if it hasn't come yet, he just sees on the horizon that a train wreck is coming his way. Either way, if a person sees suffering is coming to him or has come to him, Yifash Pesh B'Masav. So the proper response is to examine his deeds and figure out why. Shnei Mar, the pasuk says, this is the pasuk from Eicha, and the context is all this bad stuff is happening, and therefore the response should be, and this is what the pasuk picks up, Nach l'sadar keinu, let us be chipus, is like to search out. One of the Psachim says chipus without like a candle. really carefully investigate our ways, v'nachkora, examine them, chakira is examine them carefully, and then says the pasuk in Eicha, the response to the suffering should be to examine our ways carefully, and then once we see what we're doing wrong, v'nashuva ad Hashem, then we should do tshuva and return to Hashem, doing righting what we did wrong. So therefore, you see that one who has suffering comes away, who should be mefash pesh, should be examine his ways carefully. Now, what happens if pishpesh? What if he did examine his ways, v'lo matzah, but he didn't see anything to ascribe the suffering to? Now, it goes without saying that there's no such thing as a person who doesn't do anything wrong, and therefore, of course, if you examine ways, you'll find things that are wrong. But we have a principle, which is that there's some sort of, mida k'neged mida, like poetic justice isn't quite the right translation for that, but there's suffering is instructive. It's not just punitive. It's not meant to be punitive. It's meant to be instructive and rehabilitative, which means that you're meant to be able to learn from your suffering and be mefash pesh, examine your ways, and say, "Oh, this happened to me for a reason. I better, Hashem's giving me a wake-up call to change my behavior." So if there has to be a link between the problem, meaning the root problem, the thing that the person did wrong, and the symptom, which is the suffering. So, if someone is speaking lashon hara about you, the presumption should be, well, maybe you did that to someone else, or I don't know, if you broke your ankle, maybe because you were using your feet to do something that was inappropriate, and so on, like that idea. You should have some way to connect. That's what connect what's going wrong with what you did wrong. So that's important. So the assumption here is not just that if you see nothing wrong, but the point is nothing adds up exactly. I think I told a story to the Mishnah recently, but I'll tell it to you also. My chavrusa, his name was Greenfield, but he was Rav Moshe Feinstein's great grandson. So he told me at the end of his life, near the end of his life, Rav Moshe had some sort of thing put in, in his heart. I don't know, pacemaker or stent, something like that. I don't know, maybe stent to heart, whatever, I don't know. Whatever procedure was done, some sort of cardiac procedure was done, and it was giving him a hard time. And so he was trying, I guess, so he was doing what the Gemara says. So his wife at some point says to him, like, what's the matter? So he says he's been trying to figure out why he's having this heart trouble, but nothing. He's like narrowed it down to 3 things in his life, or whatever, 3, 4, some number. I forgot the number. It doesn't matter. Like he's figured there's 3 possible things or 4 possible things, but like none of them really make quite sense. So he's very troubled and he can't figure out what he did to deserve this particular suffering from his heart. So and that made him very upset. He was unsettled because of that. If that would be the end of the story, that's an amazing story. That's an amazing story in its own right. Like, imagine, there are 3 things, but they're not quite like matim to heart. I can't the heart connection, so it can't be it. Imagine 3 things that are wrong. In any case, so she said to him, "No, you're wrong. It's none of those 3 things. It's because when the doctor put in the whatever they did, so you thought that was going to fix you, and since you believe in that, so now you're suffering from it." So he said, "Yes, you're right," and that gave him peace of mind that gave an answer. So that's a heavy story. In any case, I think it's even true. So that's it. So the Fash Mashemasa means that you're supposed to try to figure out the connection, and that would be instructive to you to, as the Pasuk says, to return to the tshuva. But sometimes you can't figure it out. Sometimes there's no connection. So if you can't make the connection, so what are you supposed to do? So the Gemara says, in that case, you're told Yitle is Yitle literally means to suspend, like to hang on a hook. Yeah. But it's a ascribe it to, like this. I'll just give you an example, which maybe is instructive of this word. There's a din if a woman sees a stain, a blood stain. So she has to be afraid maybe that blood stain is uterine blood, which will make her a nida. But there's a din, which is if it's less than a grissa size, the size of a small coin, so she can ascribe it yitla, she can be tola it, that's something, ascribe it to, that it's just like a dead louse. So forget that din, that's not relevant. But the point is that you're found like a stain, and you're saying, oh, it could be from a bad thing, but instead of ascribing it to something else, I mean, tola it on the possible other reason, which is a dead louse, maybe. So here's the same thing here. Yitle, be tola, it means if you can't figure out what you did wrong, that doesn't mean what you did wrong was what we're about to say, which is Bittul Torah. Maybe you just aren't thinking hard enough to what you did wrong. But the point is, if you're really stuck, so the proper response isn't, oh, well, I guess Hashem is just unjust and making me suffer for no good reason. No, that's not true. Even if there isn't a specific thing which is tipping you off to why you've got the suffering, maybe it's something much more general. And the general crime, if you will, which is generic and can be ascribed to anything, perhaps, is the crime of Bittul Torah, of not having learned Torah. So if the Yitla is your Tola it, you should ascribe it to Bittul Torah.
So is he saying to learn Torah?
We didn't say, we just said, well, that would be the response, right? But here we're just saying, the mitzvah was to be mefashpesh b'maasav. So the Gemara, line 30, the Gemara says, hishpesh, if you did look, you examined your ways, v'lo matzah, but there's no reasonable thing to ascribe it to, then yitla, then it just assume, because you have nothing else to assume it to, that it's the Bittul Torah. You should hang the Yisurim on the hook of the Bittul Torah crime. Shene'emar, as the pasuk says, Ashrei HaGever Asher Tiasrenu Ka. Fortunate is the man who Hashem gives Yisurim to, Mutorascha Tilamdenu, and teaches him from his Torah. So the point is, the way Rashi understands it, is that his problem was not learning Torah, and therefore by being afflicted, that will push the person back to learning Torah, because he is told on not learning Torah, and that would then be the proper response. So in other words, so the Gemara is saying here that if you don't know what to ascribe it to, you should ascribe it to Bittul Torah, because that's most likely the reason. Now, why should that be most likely the reason? So the Gruha says, yeah, because you're just too dumb to know what you did wrong, because you didn't learn enough Torah. If you learn more, you know exactly what you did wrong. That's, I'm sure there's no shortage of Jews who think they're Shomer Shabbos, but they have no idea because they just don't know Hilchos Shabbos. They think they're Shomer Shabbos, but if they know more, they realize they're doing it wrong. I guess we're all like that, right? There's always more to learn. So that is the Gruha's point. If you can't figure out what you did wrong, that's just because you just don't know enough. And it's because you're Bittul Torah. If you've been learning more, you know exactly what you did wrong. The Nefesh HaChaim's approach, that's the Talmud of the Gruha, he has a more generic, less cute but more direct. He understands it that since Talmud Torah affects your whole being, so it's it's generic in terms of it's systemic. It affects your systemic health. So if you're Mevatel Torah, you don't learn the Torah as you could, so that's going to affect your whole body, and then anything can go wrong as from that source. I don't know I don't have an exact analog with science, but if you have a systemic problem, a person, well, it's not a person, say has cancer, let's say. So then everything starts falling apart. Everything starts, or autoimmune disease, everything starts falling apart. And why should he be getting pneumonia or tohurt or bad circulation problems? It's all back to the systemic problem. If the system is totally unhealthy, then it can crop up in many different ways. So the same kind of thing, the Talmud Torah is being neglected, and the whole body of the Jew is made to learn Torah. So if that's going wrong, then it's all going wrong, as opposed to some particular small thing like you have a blister on your tongue, maybe it's because of Lashon Hara. It's not like that. If you have a blister on your tongue, you never speak Lashon Hara, it's because the whole body's wrong, but you're not learning Torah, and therefore it's all going wrong. So ascribe it till you did learn about Torah. Okay, so that's that. Now, of course, it's very possible that a person could know that he wasn't Mevatel Torah. Now, the point is, the person looked at his ways and he said, well, I don't know what I did wrong, but it definitely wasn't Bittul Talmud Torah, because I learned as much as I can or could be expected of me, whatever it is. So then, there's still a possibility of something else. See, I think we're in line 31, I should say. Bimtala, if you do ascribe it to Bittul Torah, velo matzah, and yet still you don't find it, meaning you don't find in your schedule where the Bittul Torah is happening. That's not, you just don't buy it, like Rav Moshe, I guess. Rav Moshe, perhaps if the story is true, doesn't buy it. I don't know what I did wrong, but Bittul Torah wasn't it. Rav Moshe, I'll tell you the story of Rav Moshe on that point. So, same, Chavrusa told me. He said Rav Moshe once made a big siyum when he made a big party when he made a siyum. So the family asked him, this isn't the first time he finished. I'm sorry, he made a siyum when finishing Shas, made a big party. But it was uncharacteristic since that wasn't the first time he finished Shas, and so they asked him, why is this siyum, different siyum that we use in the next section we finish us. So he said, because I have a seder when I'm waiting, like at a, in the line at the bank or I don't know, traffic light, whatever. When he's on hold, he had a seder that he started going through shots just in his hold time, like the minutes when he's waiting for things to happen, and like reclaiming those lost seconds, if you will. And this was a scene on finishing all of shots while he was like waiting in line at the post office and so on. So we made a special scene because that was so to speak time that otherwise would have lost for him, but he like managed to grab an extra time through shots with it. That was very dear to him. So if you're like that, and therefore Bittul Torah, you use your time wisely, and that isn't a place to ascribe the suffering from, so it's not from any particular crime, and nor is it from Bittul Torah, so what are you left with? So, 1:31 says, B'yadua, so then you know for sure, Yisurim Shel Ahava. These must be afflictions that are coming out of love from Hashem. And that will become our topic, Yisurim Shel Ahava. We're segueing to that. Shneimar, the pasuk that shows that there's such a thing as Yisurim out of love, like what's that supposed to mean? So we'll have to explore it. But in the case here it says, the pasuk says, Kies Asher Yehav Hashem Yochiach. He who Hashem loves gets tochacha, gets rebuked. That's the pasuk. So Hashem takes interest in you, and by taking interest in you, He's giving you tochacha, and Yisurim are like tochacha, like spurring you on, and that can be done even if you didn't do something wrong. Now, this presents different proportions, like a big theological problem, because some, like Rishonim's worldview, is that Yisurim can't happen to you if you didn't do anything wrong. So like, what is Yisurim Shel Ahava? Like, how could it be? How could it be? So there are many different approaches. I don't like want to spend what could be perhaps days on the topic of Yisurim Shel Ahava. It's like
a test or
topic. So the gist is something like this. Something like, I'll give you a few gists. The gist is either that, we'll say, your version first will say, that everyone's maybe familiar with the notion of nisayon, like a test that people have. So the idea is, and I guess tests also described in different ways, but the basic point is that a person has some greatness and potential that's not brought out in actuality. So therefore, the test allows him the possibility of bringing it out into realizing his potential, which is only dormant because something hasn't had, I don't know, like. That's what all the disciples of us were, but just to give an example. Yeah, but I'm trying to get like a. I don't know, like a marathon runner, let's say, just to take an example. So, like, if you're not in the business of running marathons, like, no one ever is going to run 26 miles for the fun of it. Like, it's just not going to happen. You're never going to exert yourself to that level because, like. But then there's this thing put on the table called a marathon. All of a sudden, now you are able to take which was you probably weren't quite at the ability to do a marathon, but now since it's there, before you train for it and get yourself to that next level, which you already were. If you can run 18 miles, you're in great shape, obviously. But if you run 24 miles, it's a different league. They hit that wall at 18 miles. There's so that the fact that it's been put out there, like to run the marathon, you've now raised yourself to a level you've never ever done, because in your normal life, never does it come up that you need to be more fit than to run 18 miles. Something like that. So the same thing is you're going through your life, you reach a certain level of complacency or a certain level of plateau, and like you're at the top of your game. I don't know, like if you play any competitive sport, so like you're a tennis player, let's say. So like it's hard to get any better if you're already number one in the league. Like, you don't have to play with, then no one on the other side of the court. Like you plateau. Like you can't get any better because you need someone else to be there to push you. It could be psychological push, just sort of that gets you up. So that's the notion of one of the approaches for Nisayon, and the same with Yisurim Shel Ahava, is that like you're in the game of Avodas Hashem and like controlling yourself and mastering your midos and developing yourself. But like if you're at the top of your game, then like there's nothing, because relative to there's no more. You've mastered everything around you, so there's no more room to grow because there's nothing to bring it out of you. So Nisayon puts a challenge there that makes it more difficult for you to, and then you can rise to that challenge also. So Yisurim function that way also, in different ways. In other words, in various ways. So perhaps, just to take care of that metaphor a little further, if you're serious about learning to, become a good marathon runner, so you might train in a high elevation with not enough less oxygen. And that, because you, so to speak, have that extra challenge that makes you become better at your game down back on sea level, because your body has to learn to cope with a bigger challenge. That's the nature of Yisurim, right? In other words, the guy already can run his marathon just great, and if he practices every day, all day, at home there on the beach in San Diego, so then he'll never get better than 2.5 hours in the marathon. But if he trains up in Denver, that's, for 6 months, when he comes back down to San Diego, he'll run the marathon in 2 hours 50 minutes, because the difficulty of having to operate in a more challenging environment built him up, something like that. So that's one approach in Yisurim Shel Ahava, that a person's what do you want for you? He gets in the morning and aids, he davens with kavanah, he learns all day long, he takes care of his family, he's a good guy, he doesn't have Yitzhak to talk about anymore, that's it. He's complacent, he's made it to the top of his game. So then he has something else, all of a sudden when he goes to, every day he's got a headache, so that now he's got to overcome the headache issue also when he learns, when he gets out of bed and so on, that will bring him to the next level. Something like that. So that's one approach in Yisurim, that it builds you up and brings something out of you. Another approach, they all become different, in my mind, at least in my mind, different shades of gray from this idea of bringing out the potential. But there's another approach, which is a little another extreme, which is that the Yisurim Shel Ahava give a person extra schar, because there's a rule. The rule is from Tzara Agra. The reward is a function of how much effort you put in. So as a person gets in his comfort zone and he's mastered his life, then there's no more struggle anymore. If you've been keeping the same routine for 10 years, so then you just keep it. You don't think too much when you get up in the morning, when you down, because that's what you do. So by having a setback or a difficulty, then that makes it more of a struggle, and that earns you more reward. So let me just now speak out what I've said. So I've said two kind of different approaches, and I think it's a kind of a range in between of nuance it is. On the one hand, I'm saying it's to make you be'etzem better, to make you a better Oved Hashem. Hashem, so to speak, gives you, puts weights in your ankles, so now when you walk it's more difficult, which then ultimately make you a stronger runner when you take the weights off, so to speak. That's one approach. The other approach is that, Hashem wants to reward a person, that's what Hashem's agenda is, he wants to be mated. So, but reward is a function of effort. If you've reached a level of complacency, which is a bad thing, but maybe what can you do? I do everything that's my life demands of me. What more can I do? So Hashem will then give you something else to contend with that it makes it more difficult, so you're worthy of more reward. And it's a reward issue. That latter approach is how the ones who will deal with nothing bad ever happens, the person doesn't deserve it. We'll take that kind of tack and say, this isn't bad at all. This is this time. And if you've, Narisi Gams, kind of Tzaddik Ne'ezav, I've never seen a tzaddik who's been abandoned. So one of the pshatim that people say, it's well-known pshat, is the tzaddik doesn't feel abandoned by Hashem. That's takes a madrega. I don't perceive it as suffering. There was a speech that was given not long ago, and the raise of people's hackles, that the subject of this shir was righteous people never suffer, because they don't perceive it as suffering. They perceive it as another opportunity. So that those unfortunately will approach it. That it's not a punishment, it's a reward. What do you want?
But they don't accept it because they think they're getting an award. They don't accept it with happiness because they think they're getting a reward. It's a different...
Yeah, they're not accepting it because they're getting a reward, indeed, but the point is they don't perceive it as... They don't wake up in the morning and say, why is Hashem doing this to me? Why is Hashem being so nasty to me? They're not perceiving it in that way from the outset. There's a famous... Gosh, where is that story? I can't remember if it's there's a story that's lurking in my head, but just abstracting. I can't remember if it's Nachum Ish Gamzu, maybe you'll tell me, it's a famous story, that someone asked, someone went to the Rabbi or whoever he was, I don't know if it was a Mora, Razisha, yeah, that's right, it was Razisha, that's exactly what it was, thank you. Razisha, and he said he wants to learn how to deal with suffering, and they told me, the Rabbi told me, probably Razisha's brother, who was, it doesn't matter, so he went to Razisha, and he said, I heard you know how to deal with suffering, and I can't learn it. He said, well, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never suffered a day in my life. Even though he's So that would be one approach. Okay, that Yisurim Shel Ahava isn't Yisurim in the eyes of the sufferee at all, if you will. In any case, whatever it is a big can of worms. This is Tzaddik Meralo, which is what we're saying here. But this is a bad kind of way of talking about a person who's so good that he did nothing wrong, not even Bittul Torah, and yet he's still suffering. That's like a big can of worms. We'll discuss it more actually a little bit as we go on, Yisurim. But
Is that like Melitz Yosher concept? Something like that?
so another approach altogether is not for him at all. It's for like the door that needs this. Again, there's many approaches. Like this is a big question. The truth is, even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't get to the bottom of it, so we're not going to be there. But I don't want to focus on this. I'm just addressing this as a concept. It's called Yisurim Shel Ahava. That Hashem loves you, and therefore He afflicts you. So I'm giving you two ways to think like, well, why would He do that? Either to bring out more out of you, that more than actualize what you have in potential, or to give you more schar. And then there's I thought there's lots of, in my mind anyways, shades of gray between those two ideas. In any case, so that's now we've segued into Yisurim Shel Ahava now. The Gemara here on line 31 says, Amar Rav Sechora, Amar Rav. Oh, I've read it terribly, sorry. Again, Amar Rava, Amar Sechora, Amar Rav Huna. Kol she'Kadosh Baruch Hu chafetz bo, anybody who Hashem desires, Med'ako b'Yisurim. Hashem crushes him with Yisurim. Shneimar, the pasuk says, V'Hashem chafetz dak'o hacheli. Like the one who Hashem desires, He crushes him with sickness, something like that. So you see Hashem's. That's the point. That when Hashem likes you, He crushes you. I'm sure you've heard many times. There's a mashal said like the Jews are like olives, like you have to crush them. Come on, to get out the oil, get out the good stuff. So something. Oopsie. Sorry if I was listening on the tape. I'm getting their ears. So Hashem crushed them to get out the good stuff, like I'm saying, getting out potential maybe. Now, Yachal afilu lo kiblan. Now, you might think that that's true even if a person doesn't want it, against his will. Hashem says, I don't know, this is going to hurt me, but it hurts you. No, and therefore a person doesn't want it, but Hashem crushes them anyways. No, it's not true. Hashem, if a person is not makabel and ma'ava, if a person doesn't accept Yisurim out of love, Hashem won't give it to him. Talmud Lomar, as you see from the pasuk, im tasim asham nafsho. The pasuk continues on. This little pasuk in Shel or Darshni. So Hashem crushes the person who He loves if he accepts it on himself. He places it on himself. But nafsho implies the person's will. If a person literally means if a person acknowledges the guilt on himself. That's a literal translation. In tasim, to place upon his shoulders, asham, the guilt on the nafsho of the soul. But the drasha is ma asham ladat. The same way he has to accept the asham, the guilt, but in korban asham. And we talked about using words in two different ways. So the drasha is not the guilt, but the korban, called the korban asham, which is a guilt offering, which must be offered ladat. A person who must offer willfully. You can't just, in other words, I can't just say, "Oh, you're chayv and asham zelos. I'll take a sheep out of your backyard and bring it." And it's not going to work. A person has to be agreeable to offering the korban to get the atonement. Af Yisurim ladat. Same goes with this Yisurim. I guess the Yisurim Shel Ahava, that a person who doesn't want them, who isn't accepting of them, would get them in the first place. So now, if you follow now, I'm sort of brushing this over, but we're darshing at the pasuk. So the pasuk in Yeshaya started out, Hashem chafetz dako checheli, a person who Hashem wants, Hashem crushes him with suffering. The pasuk continues on, im tasim asham nafsho, as long as he, with the drasha, he accepts it upon himself like an asham, and he wants the suffering. V'im kiblam, and if he does accept them, maschara, what is his reward? So the pasuk continues on, yira zera, yarich yamim. he will see children and have a lengthening of days. So that's the schar of accepting Yisurim Ahava. Below Od, not only that, not only will he have children and length of life, Ela shetalmudo miskayim biyado, that his learning will literally be kept in his hand, meaning he retains his learning. Shneimar, as the end of the pasuk says, v'chefetz Hashem, which is the Torah, the thing that Hashem's desired object, something like that, Hashem's beloved thing, biyado yitzlach, he will succeed in having it in his hand. The guy who has accepted the Yisurim. So again, we broke up this one pasuk in 4 pieces. First we said, Hashem chafetz dag'o chacheli, the person Hashem wants is crushed with sickness. You see that there's Yisurim Ahava. But it's only if the person wants it. I'm just reviewing the second part of the pasuk. Only if the person accepts it, as the pasuk says, Im tasim asham nafsho. As long as he accepts it like an asham, the ratzon, willfully upon himself. And if he does, what's his schar? First of all, a year as zera, he has offspring and yarach yamim, and length of days. Below also his learning he has learning in his hand. At the end of the pasuk says, v'chefetz Hashem, which is the Torah, b'yado yitzlach. He will succeed in having it in his hand. Period. So, now, we're going to talk about the nature of, what is possibly Yisurim Shel Ahava. So we have a machlokas. It's actually 3 machlokas, but first, just 2 of the 3 parts. Pligiba, which is, we talked about, I can't remember when, we talked about plag being half. I forgot that.
This morning,
We didn't, someone brought that as a proof. I forgot what that was. But anyways, the word plag means half. I forgot the context, we saw it already once before. But here, it's pligi, which is to be used as a verb, to be divided in half, because it means these 2 people argued. They were divided over a certain issue. So pligi ba means so-and-so had a machlokas with so-and-so. So I'm saying from the word, they were divided. Pligi ba, they were divided. They argued, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi and Rabbi Ahava bar Chanina. Oh, it must have been the same structure, maybe. So they were just disagreeing on the nature of what is possibly Yisurim Shel Ahava. Chadamar, one of them said, Eluhem Yisurim Shel Ahava. What is possibly Yisurim Shel Ahava? Kol she'ein behen bittul Torah. Any kind of suffering that doesn't implicate him learning less Torah. Because if he has to learn less Torah, that means Hashem would be doing this to a guy we love. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Ashri hagever. Fortunate is the man, Asher Tias Renuka, that Hashem is, gives him musar, something like that, Hashem chides him. Mutorascha tilamdenu, and you teach him your Torah. So the guy who Hashem, you can only be Ashri, only fortunate if Hashem teaching his Torah. If Hashem's not teaching his Torah, meaning the affliction you have makes it stay home because your stomach's upset, and that's your Yisurim, that wouldn't be Yisurim Shel Ahava, because you can't learn now, you can't go to the base measure. Hashem would do that to someone we loved. It was something else that would not prohibit you or inhibit you from coming to learn. But Chadamar, the other opinion, is it's not, the issue isn't being able to learn Torah or not that's indicative of whether something is Yisurim Shel Ahava, but rather if you can daven. Elohim Yisurim Shel Ahava, what are Yisurim Shel Ahava? Kol she'ein ben bittul tefillah. Any suffering which makes you, it could be Yisurim Shel Ahava, provided that it doesn't inhibit your ability to pray. The person who can't pray, for example, will space enough to the stomach, funnily enough, not an example I gave. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Baruch Elokim, blessed is God, Asher lo heisir tfilasi, who didn't turn away my prayer. So you see, it's didn't decline my ability to pray. V'chasto me'iti, and he did, he in his chesed. He didn't hold back his chesed from me. So chesed is his love for me. That's the whole point here, right? That the Yisurim Shel Ahava is some kind of chesed from Hashem. So a person is not able to daven, his tefillah is being turned away, so that's not an indication of chesed of Hashem, must be something else. Hashem is punishing him because he did something wrong. So 2 opinions here. One is, it's Yisurim Shel Ahava, perhaps, unless you can't learn. One is Yisurim Shel Ahava, perhaps, unless you can't pray, in which case it's for sure not Yisurim Shel Ahava. But there's a third shita here. Amlahu, Rabbi Abba braid Rav Chia bar Ava, Achik Am Rav Chia bar Ava, Am Rav Yochanan. A long string that says this. Rav Yochanan had said, Elu ve'elu Yisurim Shel Ahava. Rav Yochanan says no, both suffering that prohibits you from learning, and something which inhibits you from, not prohibit, but inhibits you from praying, both still could be Yisurim Shel Ahava. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Kies asher ye'ahev Hashem yochiach. Whoever Hashem, because it says, he who Hashem loves, Hashem chastises. That's the Yisurim. So, Elamatam lomar. So then, what's the pasuk we had before about umitoras chatzalam denu? You teach him your Torah, which was the first of the opinions, which says, Ashrei, the person who Hashem chastises and is taught Hashem's Torah. So how could you understand that not being able to learn Torah still could be Yisurim Shel Ahava? So that he answers, Al Tikri. I love this. This is classic. Al Tikri Tilam. Read it for yourselves and see how impossible it is to read. There's no Nakudos here. We say, don't read it as those letters, Taf, Lamed, Mem, Dalet, Nun, Vav. Ella, rather read it by Taf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Dalet. Mem, Taf, Lamed, Mem, Dalet, Nun, Vav. The same exact thing. That's different Nakudos. That's what I find very entertaining. Al Tikri Tilam Danu, which is you teach him. Ella Tilam Denu, you taught us. You teach us. It's funny, right? In any case, that's just how it is. That's how it is. So, meaning that Rabbi Yochanan saying the pasuk that says that the one who Hashem loves, he chastises, and you taught this to us in your Torah. That's how he reads Tilam Denu. You taught it to us. How does Hashem teach it to us in His Torah that Yisurim brings out the best in you? You taught this from your Torah from a kol v'chomer. What's a kol v'chomer? Mishain. Okay, well, let me stay outside for a second. There's a din. If a person has an Eved Ivri, that means a non-Jewish person who becomes owned by a Jew as a slave. So that Eved Ivri, did I say Eved Ivri? I'm sorry.
You said Ivri, Kanani.
Sorry, wrong. Yeah, sorry. There's a din of Eved Kanani. There's two kinds of slaves. Jewish slaves, Eved Ivri, and Eved Kanani, non-Jewish slaves. They should not be used by the same term at all, because they're not really at all alike. An Eved Ivri, a Jewish servant, I will translate now as, is just an indentured servant. The way he got there most probably is that he is indebted. He stole money or he took money that he can't repay back. What's he going to do now? So basically he goes into servitude to the person who stole the money until he can work off his debt, which is limited to 6 years, not connected to Shemitah, and after that he goes free. And the whole time he's a regular Jew in every way, shape, or form. He has to do whatever Jews have to do. He's a Jew. He's a Jewish guy who's just in debtor's prison. Only there's one difference basically. He can be forced to marry the non-Jewish slave girl. But other than that, he's a regular Jew who has to go to the Pesach Seder and has to put on tefillin every morning like a Jew. That's an Eved Ivri. After 60 years max, he goes free and on with his life. Back to being a regular human being. Regular citizen. An Eved Kanani is different. An Eved Kanani is a slave, which should be translated as a slave correctly. It means it's a human being that is owned by another human being. So this is a non-Jewish person who's now owned as a chattel, as like an object by a Jew. Difficult topic, I don't want to wrap up right now. That's factually what it is. I saw a great piece on this response that Rabbi Wine wrote, circulated. I don't think that bogged down right now, like the justice and the rationale behind. But the fact is, the Torah provides that a Jew can own a non-Jew as a piece of property. So that is a slave. So he's called an Eved, literally a Canaanite slave. And there's complicated rules I don't get into either, but he's a quasi-Jew. He has to go to, he has a bris milah, he goes to the mikvah, and he's like, he's mechuyev in mitzvahs like a woman, like a Jewish woman. He's like a quasi-Jew. He eats the korban Pesach with his master. He participates in that, which is like the national, event of national unity. So he's like, so the Eved Kanani is like, he's I'll call him quasi-Jew right now. He's somewhere in the middle. But he's still owned by the Jew. And he's not mechuyev in mitzvahs like a Eved Ivri would be, or a regular Jew would be. So does the mitzvahs aseh shezman grama. Usual, he doesn't have to say Kriya Shema in the morning, that kind of stuff, put on tefillin, etc. Now, he's owned in perpetuity, and like his children are owned by the master, and that's how it goes. It's like a piece of property. Again, I'm not discussing legitimacy and logic and rationale behind it. That's just the fact that it did. But if the master strikes the Eved and cause him to lose a limb, or even a tooth, so certainly he chopped his arm or something, but even an eye or a tooth, if he knocks out his tooth when he hits him, so then the Eved Kanani goes free. He's totally free, and as a freed Eved Kanani, he becomes a Jew. It's a backdoor to becoming Jewish. He becomes a full-blown Jew. That's the din. By the way, the master can just free him from Stam. He's a 10th die for a minion. Famous story. He just free him, and then he'll be freed, and then he'll be the 10th die for a minion because he becomes a Jew. In any case, so the Kol V'chomer here is, I'll say it outside first, that an Eved Kanani is liberated if he should, suffering should be afflicted upon him by the master. And you can see the analog to Hashem being the master of us. And even one tooth gets knocked out, which is like relatively minor he's totally liberated. He gets to go free. That's legal. So then the Kol V'chomer will be when Hashem, the master, afflicts a person, and that affliction is going to be systemic. When you have a migraine headache, or when your child can't find a shit up, or whatever the story is, that's like encompasses your life. It's not just a small toothache or a lost tooth, but that's put it back in. So that's the Kol V'chomer, that systemic suffering, not in a literal sense, but on a philosophical, metaphysical, psychological sense, liberates you. The suffering liberates you. And that's our discussion. The discussion is we're saying that Yisurim Shel Ahava is a gift from Hashem, and it's liberating. So that's what he's saying. That Rabbi Yochanan says, even if you can't learn Torah, even if you can't daven, still, certain people have to become those packages, because that's something Hashem taught us. You learned, you taught us this thing that Yisurim is liberating. Here's the Kol V'chomer that teaches it to us. Maybe let's explore a little more tomorrow when we're out of time. But here's the Kol V'chomer. Again, it's on line. It's on line 39. Yeah, 39. So here's the Kol V'chomer that Hashem Tilamdeinu taught us. Kol V'chomer M'shein V'ayin. It's a Kol V'chomer from Shein V'ayin, the tooth and the eye. Ma Shein V'ayin. Just like when it comes to a tooth and an eye, Shehein Echad Me'evar Shel Adam. There's one little limb, or even a tooth, right? And the Eved Yotze Behen L'Cherus, the slave is liberated and goes free by losing one of them when the Adon knocks him out. Yisurim, when it comes to something much broader, Yisurim, generic, all-encompassing suffering, Shemamarkin Kol Gufa, they purge the whole body, Shel Adam of a person, Al-Achas Kama V'Kama, all the more so, that is liberated. The Yisurim are somehow liberated. I'll give one illustration in the short time we have here. This should be a topic of thought for you, Cherus, and how suffering is liberating and privation is liberating. When we talk about Pesach, because on Pesach, basically the theme is freedom. On the other hand, we're kind of going back to simplicity, right? And that is liberating. Going just eating matzah is all you need to be free. I'll tell you one story. I had a conversation just maybe last week with a friend of mine who's his parents are very wealthy, and they came to visit. So I asked him if his parents had a good trip here. So he said, oh no, he said they didn't have a good trip. He said to me, they can't really enjoy themselves anymore. So what's the pshat? The pshat is that they're rich and spoiled. They've spoiled themselves rotten. So now whenever they are out of their yacht and 5-star hotel, whatever it is, they can't really enjoy themselves anymore because everything seems so substandard. Oh, that's really servants. That's being a slave, right? They become slaves. They can't. But this is I'm not indicting on them. This is human psychology. Once you up the bar, very difficult to go back down, and you become imprisoned. You become imprisoned to your needs that are really monstrous, excessive. Right? So that's maybe a shot here. That when a person, we were talking earlier today, right before the shir, about stopping to put sugar in your coffee. The point is any little thing you ratchet it down, you become less dependent on these most excesses. So that's the point. That Yisurim, when you deal with problems, that is liberating. You see that, you can notch it down and you become liberated, and all of a sudden, these things that really occupied your mind and bogged you down and made you feel depressed, you realize are really rather petty. Because I have bigger things to worry about and more important things in life. And that is liberating. That is liberating. So that's one shot. Let's leave it at that. It's a good enough shot for now. I think it's a good shot. That suffering, it's systemic, it liberates you psychologically and philosophically because you become less hung up and less enslaved to things that are unimportant and still really is important. So let's stop there.
Can I ask a question?